Happy little games. Growing up in the mean streets of Iowa, I knew a lot of bad dudes. You really had to watch your P's and Q's, otherwise you might end up face to face with the likes of a Biff Tannen, a Johnny Lawrence, or the baddest of them all, Arthur Fonzarelli, who would give you a quiver in your liver with just one look. Whoa! I always wanted to be a dude with an attitude, so thankfully I was able to live out my dream of being one of those guys in the video game Bad Dudes. This knuckle-smashing, kick-throwing, pop-drinking brawler provided an insane amount of enemies to put the hurt on, as well as a pretty ridiculous ending sequence, which is why I love it so much. Despite this, the game doesn't take itself too seriously, and it's a whole lot of fun to play. What is the connection to Marvel Comics? So crack those knuckles because I've got just 2 words for ya. I'm bad! This is the history of Bad Dudes. The year is 1987 and Data East developer Makoto Kikuchi is looking to develop an arcade game that would appeal to people in the West. Mr. Kikuchi was heavily influenced by the 2-player brawling action of Double Dragon, and also buddy cop comedies such as Running Scared and 48 Hours. He wanted to design a game that was fast-paced, but also do it with tongue planted firmly in cheek, with everything just a bit over the top from the power-ups to the enemies and to the ending. While the game was designed from the ground up to appeal to the West, he also wanted it to appeal to a worldwide audience. There were some significant regional differences which I will get to in just a bit. Right from the start, the game was designed to offer 2 players simultaneously similar to Double Dragon. Unlike Double Dragon though, there would be minimal slowdown even with 2 players. He was often heard uttering the phrase, "double the players, double the profit," which is a similar adage he used for one of his later games, Joe and Mac Caveman Ninja. The viewpoint of the game is seen strictly from a side point perspective similar to Green Beret and Kung Fu Master. One major difference between these games and Bad Dudes is that much like Shinobi or Rolling Thunder, you can leap up and down depending on your position. The game was designed to run on the Data East MEC-1 hardware board, which played host to a few other popular titles such as Heavy Barrel and RoboCop. If there was ever a game that epitomized testosterone-filled 1980s Hollywood popcorn action flicks, it would be this game. From the macho attitude to endless amounts of ninjas to the wild and wacky bosses that you have to fight as you make your way through the various levels. Thanks in part to the huge amounts of male testosterone or possibly a little bit of those Hulk Hogan vitamins, the sprites are large and beefy, allowing you to unleash a whooping on those nefarious enemies. Bad Dudes was released in the arcades by Data East in 1988. Here in the States, the game was known as Bad Dudes vs. DragonNinja, but over in Japan, it was known simply as DragonNinja. As the story goes, President Ronnie has been kidnapped by the evil DragonNinja. Arnold Schwarzenegger apparently is not a bad enough dude to rescue Ronnie because he is asking for our help. This is a 1 or 2 player simultaneous co-op game in which you take control of Blade and Striker as you set out to take down the various multicolored ninjas as you attempt to rescue President Ronnie. This is a pure balls-to-the-wall action fest which is set across 7 varying stages. Your character is controlled with an 8-way joystick utilizing a button for attacking and a button for jumping. The pixel art is fantastic with lots of little details and smooth animation. The music is mostly low-key, but the sound effects are great with hard thumping hits and even some digitized voices depending on which version you are playing. The enemies are crawling out of the woodwork, and from the get-go, you will be swarmed by ninjas with gameplay reminiscent of Kung Fu Master, but a lot more polished. The gameplay is pretty swift, with your character pummeling the enemies with close-range kicks. You can duck down and attempt to sweep the leg with fast rabbit-like boots. If you find yourself being surrounded, you can also do a spinning back kick by pressing both the jump and attack buttons at the same time. You can also do jumping attacks, but the big power move in your arsenal is the charge punch, which sees you invoke a mini power punch that would make Luke Cage proud. This powerful attack sees you knock down a number of ninjas all at the same time. The different colored ninjas engulf you with their ninja magic, and some come brandishing swords as well. It's not just male ninjas that attack you, but there are also a number of kunoichi as well as vicious dogs who emit a blood-curdling whine when you kill them. You will also encounter in your travels a character who is on fire, as well as a ninja brandishing claws. Clearly, these two were inspired by Marvel Comics, the Human Torch, and Wolverine, to the point where Data East attempted to get the license to use these characters in the game from Marvel. When they were unable to obtain said license, they did the next best thing and used them without permission. Certain ninjas will also throw shurikens, but you can use your powerful kicks to deflect them. Thankfully, the red ninja warriors also have butterfingers because they will drop various items. These range from knives, which offer a short range attack, to the nunchucks, which have a long range attack and is the best in my opinion. Keep in mind though that if you die, you do lose your weapons. They also drop time bonuses as well as a red soda can for increasing energy. For the North American release, these are red cans which can be indicative of Coca-Cola, whereas in Japan, the color has been changed to blue, perhaps in reference to Pepsi. As I mentioned, the levels are varied, which sees you fighting ninjas on top of an 18-wheeler to attempting to take down the leader of the DragonNinja as he attempts to make his getaway in a helicopter. There is a boss rush on the last level, so if you had fun fighting them the first time, you get to do it all over again, although they are a bit weaker this time around. The bosses also come in all shapes and sizes, including some original characters as well as some thinly veiled rip-offs. You'll also see the return of everyone's favorite fire-breathing, tassel-twirling Russian strongman Karnov. After defeating the mini-boss at the end of each level, your character lets you and everyone within earshot know just how bad of a dude he really is. I'm bad! The levels you encounter are the streets.
Got it. Got it.
18-wheeler.
Got it.
The sewers.
Got it.
Forest.
Got it.
The train. The cave. And finally, the Ninja Den.
Got it.
The bosses you encounter are Karnov, Iron, Shadow Ninja, Animal, who was clearly based on professional wrestler Road Warrior Animal, Akai Cage, Devil Pole, and finally, the big kahuna himself, the Dragon Ninja. After you defeat the Dragon Ninja, President Ronnie appears on the screen thanking you for your service and offering to take you out for hamburgers. After this, the credits roll while you stand in front of the White House alongside President Ronnie, who is filling his face with those lovely burgers. A nice tune plays and the credits roll. There are some significant differences in the Japanese version, starting with the game being known simply as Dragon Ninja. The audio samples are different as well, so instead of yelling, "I'm bad," they shout a generic "Oh." Thanks to the Cutting Room Floor website, we can see all the differences in the sound samples between the two versions.
Okay. Got it. Oh! I'm bad! Yeah! Ha! Yeah!
The logo on the side of the truck now says Kikuchiko in reference to the game's designer rather than Data East. Instead of going for burgers, President Ronnie tells us how thankful he is and that he is now safe because of you. A statue is erected in your honor while a different tune plays in the background. Personally, I would have rather had the burgers, especially if they were White Castle. The employees of Data East have been known to put references to their previous works in other video games, and Bad Dudes is no different. We have not only the mini-boss Karnov, but also a sign warning you of his imminent arrival on the first level. Also on the train level, we have a train car that is transporting the frozen ice pop Chelnov. The arcade game was converted to a number of home systems with mostly great success, and I will get to those in just a moment. In 1990, a spiritual successor to Bad Dudes was released entitled Too Crude or Crude Buster, or even Two Crude Dudes, depending on which version you played. This featured two even badder dudes, in which players take control of a couple of mercenaries hired by the United States government to stop a terrorist organization known as Big Valley. The Valley has threatened a nuclear explosion, so it's up to the crude dudes with attitudes to stop the organization and retake New York City. Now, if you thought the gameplay mechanics were over the top in Bad Dudes, then you haven't seen anything yet. The gameplay is very similar to the original Dudes, although this time around, Steroidomania is running wild because these two guys are jacked. For example, you can pick up objects such as cars and traffic lights to use them as weapons. It's even possible to pick up the other players and enemies and use them as projectiles. To replenish your energy, there are also cutscenes where you have to beat the snot out of a power cola machine, causing those precious drinks to fall out. If you would like a more in-depth history on this game, be sure and check out my dedicated video to this title. There have been numerous references over the years in pop culture to our beloved Dudes, including the 1989 film Parenthood.
Get this guy, Come on. Oh, well, they're bad dudes. That's why they call the game Bad Dudes. Okay, I should go.
An entire arcade filled with Data East titles, including Bad Dudes, can be seen in the film RoboCop 2. The strange thing is, the Bad Dudes cabinet can clearly be seen, but it's actually Sly Spy running on the inside. There is also a reference in the 2008 video game Sam & Max Beyond Time and Space, and more. There wasn't a whole lot of merchandise available back in the day aside from t-shirts and a pretty cool looking tabletop LCD game made not by Tiger but by Remco. The arcade game was released on the Zibo, which was a Brazilian home console, in 2010. The arcade game was also released in the compilation Data East Arcade Classics for the Nintendo Wii in 2010. The arcade game has also been re-released a number of times over the years, including the latest for the Nintendo Switch back in 2018. The original NES version was included as part of the Retro-Bit Data East All-Star Collection. This was a brand new NES cartridge for your original NES console. It was also a part of the dedicated console Super Retrocade released in 2017. This has 90 different titles, but in a bit of a twist, it has both the original NES versions and arcade versions of Bad Dudes. The game was also released as part of the Data East collection on the Evercade. It was one of 4 titles offered in the dedicated arcade 1-up Burger Time minicab, along with Caveman Ninja, Karate Champ, and of course, Burger Time. A tabletop version was also released, which is cool in itself, but unfortunately it only plays the NES version. An updated version of the game was announced for the Intellivision Amico, but no screenshots were ever released. Since this system is turning out to be vaporware, who knows if this game will ever get released someplace else. At one time, filmmaker Ben David Grabinski wanted to make a film adaptation of the game. He had a pretty cool story idea involving the dudes rescuing the president, but the rights to the game couldn't be sorted due to the bankruptcy of Data East. Due to this, the idea floundered and eventually died. Attempts were made for a crowd-funded Bad Dudes 2, but the goal was not reached.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
Arcade Arsenal, RoboCop and Bad Dudes for Nintendo.
Your crate.
Part man, part machine, all game, RoboCop.
Stay out of trouble.
Bad Dudes, the forces of good have never been so bad. If you're bad enough, then you're good enough for Bad Dudes and RoboCop for Nintendo.
The game was released on a wide variety of computer platforms, but only received one console release, which was the NES version. We will get to that in just a few minutes. As far as the quality of these conversions go, we have some good, some bad, and some fugly. The computer conversions featured some pretty cool title screens, including the Amstrad version, which had never heard of the phrase copyright infringement. Then we had the Commodore 64, which only shows one character. I felt they should have changed the name to Bad Dude instead. Let me just issue a blanket statement as far as the majority of the computer conversions go, because you are only allowed one fire button. This does hinder the gameplay just a bit, but the more you play it, the more you adapt. The NES version doesn't suffer this fate as it offers two buttons. Also, none of the 8-bit versions feature simultaneous two-player action, although this option is still available on the Amiga and Atari ST. There were 3 different developers involved with this license, as Data East produced the NES version, Quicksilver produced the Apple II and MS-DOS conversions, and Imagine Software was in charge of the European computer conversions. The first one we are taking a look at is the Apple II version. This game turned out to be quite the mess. Although it does play reasonably fast, the colors make it seem as if someone ate a box of pastel colors and threw them up all over the screen. There are no intro or ending graphics, and the storyline text has been changed as well. The characters also have some floaty weight physics going on, not to mention some really odd hit detection, in which you don't even have to be anywhere near your character in order to hit them. The characters are also small and the screen doesn't scroll. Rather than barreling through the game and trying to reach the end of level boss as quickly as you could, in this one you have to defeat all the ninjas before you can proceed to the next screen. The perilous fight on top both the 18-wheeler and the train is a lot easier for the bad dudes since they don't appear to be moving. The sound effects are pure farts with a little bitty blasts all throughout the game. Sticking with Quicksilver software, let's go ahead and take a look at the MS-DOS version. For starters, the game is squished into a window that takes up 2/3 of the screen. The characters are large and resemble the arcade original, but playing this game, I'm getting flashbacks of Double Dragon for the Amiga. While the gameplay is fast with lots of enemies on screen, the animation is choppy, making for a not so great experience. Not to mention the fact that the bosses have to load before each fight. For the MS-DOS platform, this conversion was pretty typical. The sound effects are pure PC beeper with nothing but bloops and bleeps. After some digging, I did find that the DOS version did support 2 buttons, so it did help the gameplay experience. The Spectrum version is up next, and if you liked watching the 1969 moon landing, then this is the game for you. In all seriousness, it's really not too bad. Yes, the graphics are in monochrome aside from some nifty colors around the border, but the game plays at a fairly consistent speed, although it is a tad slower than the arcade original. As I mentioned, there is only one button which makes everything feel just a bit off. Due to the graphics being in monochrome, the characters tend to get lost in the backgrounds when the action gets hot and heavy. With that being said, they are large and animated decently. The backgrounds are detailed, and we even get some slick parallax scrolling. We also have some nice music on the title screen, but that's about it. The sound effects are tiny little whiffs and nothing to get excited about. As a standalone Kung Fu Master knockoff, this game would score pretty high on the Specky, but as a conversion of Bad Dudes, it's a bit suspect. If you were checking out the Spectrum version and thought to yourself, slow down there, big fella, then you should definitely play the MSX version. This is a straight up port of the Speccy, although running at about half the speed. With the loss of speed also comes horrible controls. I would run far, far away from this conversion. One of my favorite versions of Bad Dudes to play at home back in the day was definitely the Amiga version. Upon booting up the game, you are greeted with an arcade-accurate title screen and introductory scenes. Despite the arcade game being released as Bad Dudes in Europe, the game is based on the Japanese version of the game. This means that we lose out on all of the English samples, including I'm Bad. The graphics are very detailed with large character sprites, although the scrolling is a bit jerky. There are lots of enemies on screen at once, and I believe I counted 15 at one time. The game features some nice parallax scrolling and some excellent music. Yes, we get sound effects and music at the same time, which is always a plus in my book. The game controls pretty good, although it could have been much better if it had 2 buttons and the scrolling was just a bit smoother. You still get President Ronnie offering to take you out for burgers at the end. In still shots, the Atari SD version looks pretty good, although once it starts to move, it all falls apart. Instead of counting frames per second, we should be counting seconds per frame. If you ever wanted to experience a brawler in low gravity, then this is right up your alley. Despite this, the game has the entire arcade presentation with both intro and ending scenes intact. As far as the graphics go, it's very similar to the Amiga, although obviously running a whole lot slower. The music has also taken a hit, and there are no longer any digitized samples as far as the sound effects go. It controls decent if you can wrap your head around the slow frame rate. Upon first glance, the good old Commodore 64 version doesn't appear very impressive as far as the in-game mechanics go. The game opens up with some fantastic music by Jonathan Dunn, which really puts the SID chip through its paces. As a matter of fact, all the music in the game is excellent. The backgrounds are fairly detailed, and we do get some good parallax scrolling on a couple of levels. The sprites themselves are high res, and although a bit on the small side, are detailed with fairly smooth animation. On occasion, you will get some sprite tearing, but not very often. The gameplay seems a bit too fast at times, but it still plays pretty good. Thankfully, the Amstrad version is not just a port of the Speccy. This turned out really well with large colorful sprites and fairly smooth animation. The backgrounds are very detailed with multi-layered parallax scrolling to boot. Although the introductory and ending graphics are missing, everything else has been included, plus there is a nice treat for 128K owners. The game becomes a single load, and you even have digitized voice samples in the game. Despite only having one fire button, the controls are nice and tight. And finally, we have the home conversion that most people were familiar with, which is the NES version. The controls have been reinstated since we now have two separate buttons, one for jumping and one for punching, and it makes a world of difference. Something that was not reinstated though was two players simultaneously. Although the graphics are microphallic in size, they are detailed for the most part, but there is a lot of flickering. There are less enemies appearing on screen at once, but thankfully they don't take as many hits to disperse of. The entire arcade presentation is here, from the opening cinematics to the ending sequence, complete with hamburgers. What's also here is the I'm Bad voice sample at the end of each level. However, the voice that comes from the speakers sounds like it's coming from a 70-year-old man who just got through gargling razor blades. I'm bad. Something else that was changed was the ending. Instead of President Ronnie, we now have President Bush, since he had just been elected into office. The Japanese version released by Namco does offer a few differences over its American counterpart, such as short intermission screens in between each level after stage 2. Regardless, I still had a ton of fun playing this back in the day. I always loved me some Bad Dudes. It was the quintessential 1980s beat-em-up that was large and in charge and to the extreme. There is nothing finer than you and a buddy strolling down the street, kicking the crap out of ninjas trying to make it to the end of the game. If you've never had the chance to drink some pop, use nunchucks, and tell everyone just how bad of a dude you really are, be sure and give this game a shot. You'll be glad you did. If you like this video, be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Also, if you would like to support me on Patreon, please click the link below. If you would like to contribute but not sign up for my Patreon, you can always click the donate button up above. Thanks everyone for watching.